My girlfriend mocked my faith, my job, and my dreams, so I cut her off, left town, and she's still asking people where I went. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and for most of my life, I've tried to live simply, work hard, stay grounded, and hold on to my faith even when the world makes it look foolish. I'm a mechanic by day, a part-time musician by night. My hands are usually covered in grease, my wallet never exactly full, but my conscience, clean. I've never been ashamed of that. I met Lena 2 years ago at a friend's housewarming party. She was this sharp, confident woman in a navy dress, talking about marketing campaigns and travel plans. I remember thinking she looked like someone from a different world, one where people didn't worry about bills or busted engines. When she struck up a conversation with me, I was honestly surprised. She asked what I did, and when I told her, she smiled and said, "That's kind of refreshing. A man who actually builds things." It caught me off guard. Most people treated my job like a punchline, but she seemed to mean it. We spent hours talking that night. She said she loved that I was calm, real, and had depth. I told her about the songs I wrote, how I played at small cafes, and how faith kept me balanced when life got messy. She listened like it mattered. By the end of the night, I walked her to her car. She said, "You're different," in a good way. I didn't know then that different can be both a compliment and a warning. For the first few months, everything felt right, peaceful even. She'd visit me at the garage, bring coffee, watch me play guitar in the evenings. I thought I'd finally found someone who saw past appearances, someone who valued character over comfort. But looking back now, that admiration she had, it wasn't built on understanding. It was curiosity. And curiosity, when it fades, turns into something far uglier, and I'd soon learn just how quickly love can shift into mockery. In the beginning, her teasing felt harmless. She'd laugh about my old pickup truck and say things like, "It's cute, so blue-collar of you." I'd grin and play along, thinking it was just her humor. When she'd stop by the garage, she'd wrinkle her nose at the smell of oil and say, "You must really love this mess." I'd chuckle and tell her, "Yeah, it's not glamorous, but it's honest work." She'd kiss me after and say, "That's what I like about you, you're simple." I didn't realize how much that word would start to sting later. She'd occasionally make little comments about my faith, too. Once, I mentioned I was heading to church early Sunday morning, and she rolled her eyes, smiling. "You're so wholesome," she said. I respect it, though. I could never commit to anything like that. It was playful on the surface, but the undertone was clear. She saw my beliefs as cute, not meaningful. I told myself to be patient. Love, I thought, means accepting each other's differences. But her tone started shifting. The jokes became jabs. When I'd talk about my dream of opening a garage one day, she'd smirk and say, "You could do better than staying stuck in a small-town mindset." Or, "You're too smart to keep working with your hands forever." It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Like my life was something she'd outgrown before even living it. One night, she came to one of my gigs. Afterward, she smiled and said, "You're really talented, for someone who changes tires all day." I laughed it off in front of my friends, but later, when I was packing up my guitar, the words echoed in my head. I told myself she didn't mean it that way, that maybe I was being sensitive, but deep down a small part of me already knew. She didn't see me as her equal. She saw me as her project. Ever since I was a kid, I've had this vision in my head. A small garage that doubled as a music space. By day, people could bring their cars in for repairs. By night, locals could gather, play songs, and just breathe for a while. A place where noise became art and hard work met heart. My dad used to say, "Son, fix engines with your hands, but fix people with your music." That line stuck with me. It became the dream I built my life around. One evening, while Lena and I were out to dinner with her friends, someone asked me where I saw myself in 5 years. I smiled and said, hopefully running my own auto music shop, kind of a community spot. There was a beat of silence before Lena laughed. Not a small laugh, a loud, genuine laugh that turned heads. "Oh, come on," she said, still smiling. "Tell them your real plan." I froze, forcing a laugh of my own. "That is my plan." She tilted her wine glass and smirked. "He's passionate, just unrealistic," she told them. The table burst into polite laughter. Someone joked, "You mean like a broke man's fantasy garage?" I laughed too, because what else could I do? The sound felt foreign in my own mouth. My chest burned, but I swallowed it down, pretending it didn't bother me. I even played along, saying, "Yeah, Maybe one day when I win the lottery. The night ended with smiles and empty compliments, but when I got home, I couldn't shake her words. I stared at myself in the mirror, grease under my nails, calloused hands, tired eyes, and wondered if maybe she was right. Maybe my dream was small. Maybe I was small, but then deep down another voice whispered. Or maybe they just can't see what you see. Still, the laughter lingered. And for the first time, my dream didn't feel sacred. It felt like a punchline. I've never been the kind of guy who preaches or tries to convert anyone. My faith isn't a show. It's the quiet anchor that's kept me steady through every storm. When my dad died, when money ran thin, when life felt empty, prayer was what kept me grounded. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about surviving with a sense of peace. Lena knew that. I never hid it. But I also never forced it on her. I'd pray before meals sometimes, just a small moment of gratitude. One evening, we went out to this new restaurant downtown, dim lighting, soft music, the kind of place she liked because it felt elevated. When the food came, I bowed my head for a few seconds. That's when I heard her snicker. I looked up, confused. "What?" she smirked, swirling her drink. "You really think someone's listening up there?" Her tone wasn't curious, it was condescending. Like I was a kid caught believing in fairy tales. I took a breath and said quietly, "It matters to me." She leaned back, eyes sharp. "You'd go further in life if you stopped acting like some church boy. The world doesn't reward people who wait for miracles. It rewards the ones who make them." The words hit harder than I expected. I wasn't angry, I was sad. Because in that moment I realized she didn't just dislike my faith. She despised what it stood for. The humility, the grace, the belief that strength doesn't always have to shout. I tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. The rest of the meal was silent, heavy. I stared at her across the table, wondering how someone could share my life but reject the core of who I am. That night, I went to bed next to her, but I'd never felt further away, and somewhere deep inside, I knew a line had been crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Meeting Lena's friends was supposed to be a big step, one of those "we're serious now" milestones. She was excited, so I wanted to make a good impression. Her circle was full of polished professionals, marketing executives, designers, startup founders, the kind of people who spoke in buzzwords and bragged without sounding like it. I showed up in a clean shirt, brought a bottle of wine I couldn't really afford, and told myself to just be genuine. But the second I sat down, I could feel it. The subtle curiosity, the polite judgment hiding behind smiles. One of them asked, "So you actually work with your hands?" Like it was something you only read about in history books. I laughed it off, saying, "Yeah, every day." Another chimed in, "That's adorable, you're spiritual too, right? You pray before work or something?" The table chuckled. Even Lena. I forced a smile, stirring my drink to distract myself. The food was expensive but tasteless, the laughter a little too loud. I tried talking about music, about the garage, about simple things, but every topic somehow circled back to how different I was. By the end of the night, I felt like I'd been dissected, not introduced. When we got home, I finally said, "You didn't defend me once." She sighed. "Babe, they weren't being mean. They just don't get your world. You could try to blend in more. Though talk less about God and more about goals." That sentence sat in my chest like a stone. It was the first time I realized she wasn't embarrassed by me. She was embarrassed of me. That night, as she fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered, is love supposed to make you feel this small? I'd met Lena's parents a few times before, polite greetings, short conversations, but this dinner felt different. It was at a fancy restaurant, one of those places where the menus don't have prices and everyone speaks softly, like money is sacred. Lena said her parents wanted to really get to know me this time. I told myself to stay calm, be respectful, and just be honest about who I was. Her father was the kind of man who looked like he'd never lifted anything heavier than a pen. Her mother had that smile people wear when they're constantly judging but trying not to show it. "So," her dad began as the waiter poured wine. "What's your career trajectory, son?" I smiled. "I've been working at a garage for a while now, saving up to open my own place soon. Maybe even combine it with a small music studio one day." Before I could finish, Lena laughed, a nervous, sharp kind of laugh. He means his hobby, she said quickly, waving her hand like she was correcting a child. He loves what he does, but we're still figuring out his long-term goals. Her parents chuckled. Her mom said, "That's cute." "You have spirit," I froze. The words hung in the air, each one stinging worse than the last. Lena kept smiling, pretending everything was normal, sipping her wine as if she hadn't just erased me in front of everyone. I stayed quiet through the rest of dinner, nodding at questions I didn't care to answer. When the check came, her dad insisted on paying, saying, "You'll get the next one when your business takes off." It was meant as a joke, but it landed like a punch. In the car, Lena chatted about dessert and weekend plans like nothing happened. I didn't say a word. I just drove home, eyes fixed on the road, realizing the truth I'd been avoiding all along. She never saw me as a partner. She saw me as a project, and I was done being someone's fixer-upper. After that dinner, something inside me just shut off. I didn't plan it, didn't announce it. I just started pulling back. No more good morning texts. No more surprise coffee drop-offs at her office. I stopped trying to prove that what I did or who I was enough. At first, she didn't notice. Then the questions started. "Why are you so quiet lately?" She'd text. I'd reply with short answers. When we met in person, the silence between us grew heavier than any argument we'd ever had. One afternoon, she showed up at my garage unexpectedly. I was under a car, hands covered in oil, when her heels clicked across the floor. "So this is your little kingdom?" she said, glancing around like the place was a museum exhibit. I wiped my hands and said flatly, "I just need some space." Her face twisted into a smirk. "Space? Are you seriously sulking because I was honest with my parents?" I didn't respond. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. She crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. "If you're waiting for me to worship your small dreams, it's not happening," she said. "You want someone to build garages with. I want someone who builds empires." Her words hit like a physical blow, but there was no anger left in me, only clarity. I nodded slowly and said, "Good to know." She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic, maybe I was. Or maybe I just finally stopped mistaking humiliation for love." That night, I didn't replay her insults. I replayed every red flag I'd ignored, the eye rolls, the laughter, the subtle digs she'd disguised as honesty, and what hurt the most wasn't what she said that day. It was realizing that I had once looked at her and thought, this is the person who understands me. I couldn't have been more wrong. A few weeks after that fight, I thought the silence between us would give us space to cool off, to think. But what I didn't know was that while I was trying to heal, she was turning my life into entertainment. It started with a call from an old coworker, James, who used to work with Lena at her firm. He sounded uneasy. "Man, I don't want to stir trouble," he said, "but Lena's been talking about you at her office happy hours." I frowned. "Talking? Like what?" He hesitated. "More like mocking." "She calls you the small-town saint, says she's dating down until someone better comes along." I laughed, thinking he had to be exaggerating. Lena could be arrogant, sure, but that felt cruel even for her. "You sure?" I asked. James sighed. "I wish I wasn't." A few hours later, he sent me screenshots, proof. Group chat messages from her work friends. My name all over them. He still prays before meals. Adorable, right? He wrote another song about faith and fixing cars. Hallmark would be proud. At least he's loyal. Broke men usually are. Then I saw the worst one. He still keeps his mom's rosary in his truck. Says it protects him. Old superstition, but it's kinda cute. My chest tightened. That rosary had belonged to my late mother. I'd kept it hanging on my rearview mirror since she passed. It was the last piece of her I had. To her, it was superstition. I sat there, staring at those messages, numb at first. Then the numbness turned to heat. Not rage, just a clean, burning disgust. I thought about every time she'd looked me in the eye and said, "I respect your beliefs." Every time she'd kissed me after cutting me down. Every apology I'd accepted because I thought she didn't mean it. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't text her. I didn't even confront her. I just sat in my garage holding that rosary, feeling something shift deep inside me. Love hadn't died that day. It had been murdered, and I finally saw who pulled the trigger. I didn't plan some dramatic showdown. I just texted her, "We need to talk." in person. She replied almost instantly, "Finally." We met at a quiet cafe the next evening, a place we used to go early in our relationship before everything turned sour. I remember thinking how ironic it was that I was walking into the same place where I once thought I'd found love. When she arrived, she looked perfectly put together, as always. Expensive coat, perfect hair, that confident smile she used like armor. I sat across from her, calm but hollow. Without saying a word, I slid my phone across the table and opened the screenshots. She scrolled through them, expression unreadable. Then she looked up and said, "You're too sensitive, it was just banter. Everyone jokes about their partners." I felt my jaw tighten. "You mocked my mom's rosary," I said quietly. "You turned my life into a punchline," she scoffed. "Oh, come on. Don't be so dramatic. You really need to toughen up if you ever want to make it in this world." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Not because of what she said, but because it confirmed everything I already knew. She didn't see me as an equal. She saw me as something to fix, to harden, to reshape until I was unrecognizable. I stared at her for a long moment, then picked up my phone. "You know what?" I said. "You're right. I do need to toughen up, and I'll start by walking away from this." She blinked, confused. "Wait, what's that supposed to mean?" I stood up, pushed my chair back, and simply said, "Goodbye, Lena." No yelling. No dramatic exit. No last-minute apologies. Just quiet finality. The kind that echoes louder than any argument ever could. As I stepped outside into the cold evening air, I realized I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt free, and that was the moment everything truly ended. When I walked away from Lena that night, I didn't just end a relationship, I ended an era of my life. There was no grand breakdown, no long text messages begging her to understand. I simply went home, looked around my apartment, and realized I didn't belong there anymore. Everything in that space, the couch she picked, the photos on the wall, even the coffee mugs, felt tainted, like reminders of the version of myself I'd let her chip away at piece by piece. So I made a decision. I packed my tools first, my wrenches, the socket set my dad gave me, and my mother's rosary from the truck mirror. Then I sold the apartment, handed in my notice at the garage, and didn't tell a single soul where I was going. No dramatic farewell, no cryptic posts online. I just disappeared. I ended up in a small coastal city a few hundred miles away, the kind of place where the air smelled like salt and everything moved a little slower. Rented a tiny studio above a repair shop. By day, I worked on engines. By night, I played music at open mics, my songs filled with all the words I'd never said to her. Nobody there knew my story. Nobody cared who I had been. And that anonymity, it was healing in ways I didn't expect. Some nights I'd sit by the pier after my set, watching the waves crash against the rocks, the moonlight glinting off the water. For the first time in years, my mind wasn't replaying conversations or defending my worth. It was quiet. I didn't realize how heavy my life had been until I set it down. No phone buzzing. No mocking laughter. No pretending, just silence, and in that silence I finally heard myself again. At first, the silence felt like freedom. The days blurred together in a peaceful rhythm, fixing cars, strumming my guitar, walking by the ocean. But peace has a strange way of turning on you when you're alone too long. After a few months, the quiet started to echo. Nights got colder. Meals got smaller. And somewhere in that emptiness, loneliness crept in like a slow tide. There were moments when I missed her. God, I hated admitting that. I missed the sound of her voice in the morning, the way she'd rest her head on my shoulder when she was tired. Even if those moments had been laced with cruelty, they were familiar. And familiar can feel safe even when it's poison. One night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in my hand. Her name was still in my contacts, frozen there, like a door I hadn't locked properly. My thumb hovered over it. I just wanted to ask how she was doing. Maybe she'd changed. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe in some twisted way, she'd cared. But then I looked around my tiny rented room, bare walls, tools in one corner, my guitar leaning against the nightstand. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every inch of it built, without mockery, without someone rolling their eyes when I prayed, without feeling like I had to shrink just to be loved. The stillness of that moment hit me hard. For the first time, I realized that peace doesn't feel loud or exciting. It feels steady, quiet, and safe. I put the phone down, blocked her number for good. Then I sat back, breathing deep, letting that decision settle into my bones. I didn't have everything, but I had peace. And that, I decided, was worth more than any love built on disrespect. Starting over wasn't glamorous. It was slow, quiet, and often lonely. But it was real. Every small thing I did began to feel like a step toward reclaiming myself. I fixed an old bike for my landlord's grandson one afternoon. The kid's face lit up when it started on the first try. That small grin felt better than any hollow compliment Lena's world ever offered me. Days turned into months, and I began playing music again, not for validation, not to prove anything, just to feel. I started performing at a little bar near the coast. It wasn't fancy, sticky floors, dim lights, but it was full of heart. I'd sing songs about pain, faith, and second chances. People listened, really listened. After one set, an older man came up to me. He had rough hands like mine, the kind that had worked hard all their life. He said, "You sing like you've been through hell and still believe." That sentence stopped me cold, because it was true. I had been through hell, but I was still standing, still believing. I went home that night and wrote a song about that line, about surviving the kind of love that tries to erase you and finding your way back to yourself. Soon, people started remembering me, not as the guy who'd been mocked or left, but as the one whose music meant something. It wasn't fame, it wasn't success, but it was purpose. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel embarrassed by my story. I didn't hide the grease on my hands or the faith in my voice. I didn't feel small anymore. I felt proud, because everything I had left was built from nothing. And yet, somehow, it was everything I needed. It happened on an ordinary night. One of those calm evenings where the air smells like salt and the world finally feels quiet. I was sitting in my small room, tuning my guitar, when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made my stomach drop for a second. Evan, a mutual friend from back home. His message was short. "Hey man, just so you know, Lena's been asking around for you." I stared at the text, unsure how to feel. I hadn't heard her name in months. It felt like hearing from a ghost you'd already buried. Evan followed up with a screenshot of one of her social media posts, a vague quote image. "Sometimes you don't realize what you had until it's gone." And the caption, "Losing the one who truly cared hurts in ways success never heals." Apparently, she'd broken up with her new boyfriend, a lawyer, successful, well off. On paper, everything she used to say she wanted. But Evan said people at her firm had noticed how miserable she looked. "She keeps saying she misses your heart," he texted. Her words, not mine. I just sat there, staring at my phone, waiting for a wave of emotion that never came. No anger, no nostalgia, not even satisfaction, just calm. The irony was sharp, almost poetic. The woman who once mocked my faith, my dreams, my simplicity, was now craving the peace she'd laughed at. I typed a short reply to Evan. "Thanks, man, but I'm good." Then I put the phone down, leaned back, and let out a slow breath. I wasn't the one who got away. I was the one who walked away, and for the first time, I truly understood the difference. It was a quiet Sunday morning when her name appeared in my inbox. I hadn't seen it in almost a year, and for a second my heart stumbled. Old reflexes, I guess. The subject line read, "I owe you an apology." For a moment, I just stared at it, thumb hovering above the screen. Curiosity won. I opened it. Her message started softly, almost timid. "I've been doing a lot of reflecting," she wrote. "I was immature, selfish, and I didn't appreciate what I had when I had the chance." She said she'd started therapy, that she was working on herself, and even mentioned that she'd been rediscovering faith, the same faith she used to mock me for. She talked about regrets, about realizing success means nothing without love, and how I was the kindest person she'd ever met. Then came the line that made me exhale through a bitter smile. If you're open to it, I'd love to meet. Just to talk. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because I was tempted, but because it was strange to see her trying to rewrite history. She wasn't seeking forgiveness. She was seeking relief. She wanted to unburden her guilt, not heal the damage she caused. What she missed wasn't me. It was the comfort of the man she once ridiculed, the man who absorbed her cruelty and still loved her anyway. I sat there for a while, thinking about how far I'd come, from the guy who laughed off her insults to the man who could see through them. Then, without a second thought, I hit delete. No reply, no closure conversation, no lingering questions, just silence. The same silence that once broke me, now protecting me, and it felt like the most peaceful no I'd ever said. Closure isn't something you chase. It's something that finds you once you stop running toward the pain. For the longest time, I thought I needed a final conversation, some perfect explanation to make it all make sense. But the truth is, some stories don't end with words. They end with distance. I never replied to Lena's email. I didn't block her either. I just let it sit there, buried under new messages, forgotten like an old scar that doesn't hurt anymore. Revenge never crossed my mind. What would be the point? She already had to live with herself, and that's punishment enough. Instead, I did the only thing that's ever helped me process anything. I wrote. The song came to me one night while sitting by the window, watching the ocean fade into the dark. I called it Faith in the Ashes. It wasn't about her, not directly. It was about losing yourself in someone else's shadow and finding your way back to the light. About how belief isn't just about God, it's about believing in your own worth again. I recorded it on an old mic, posted it online, and didn't think much of it. But somehow, it spread. People started sharing it. Comments poured in. This feels like healing. It's like peace turned into sound. The quiet in this song says everything I never could. For the first time, my pain had purpose. I didn't need her apology or anyone's validation. The silence I once feared had become my sanctuary. That's when I finally understood. You don't always have to respond to the people who broke you. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer you'll ever give. If you've listened this far, maybe you've been where I've been, trying to love someone who makes you feel small. Someone who takes the pieces of you that shine the brightest and calls them flaws. I used to think love meant endurance, that if you just kept giving, they'd finally see your worth. But here's what I learned the hard way. If someone mocks what makes you you, they're not your soulmate, they're your silencer. Love without respect isn't love at all. It's a slow kind of death, one where you keep shrinking, hoping they'll finally notice the space you've left empty just to fit their world. I lived like that once. I let someone convince me that faith was foolish, that my work was beneath her, that my dreams were a joke. And every time I stayed quiet, I lost another piece of myself. But walking away, quietly, without revenge or noise, that's where I found peace. That's where I learned self-worth doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself. I still hear from people back home sometimes. They say Lena still asks where I went, that she tells people she lost the good one. Maybe she did. But that's not my concern anymore. I'm not lost. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. On the coast, fixing engines by day, playing my songs by night, surrounded by peace that doesn't need permission to exist. I don't hate her. I don't even resent her. She taught me what love is not, and that's a lesson I'll carry for life. So if you're listening and someone's making you feel small, leave. You don't owe anyone your silence. You owe you.